Greetings, everyone. I'm Eric Hansen, and on behalf of everyone here at OTTX, I am delighted to welcome you to this episode of OTTX's vidcast, The Buzz, where we offer our online stage up to a few of the streaming industry's top pontificators to drop their version of the truth on us about what's going on, what it means, and what we should do about it in the tumultuous, tempestuous world of OTT streaming. Before we turn things over to this episode's crew of Buzzcateers, I want to make sure to mention that you can find and subscribe to all episodes of The Buzz via podcast on Spotify. Just search for OTTX and be sure to follow us so you'll be notified about future episodes as well. We'll drop the Spotify link into the podcast in the chat so you'll be able to get to it easily. Presiding over today's group of OTT rabble-rousers, we're excited to welcome our moderator, a longtime friend and partner of OTTX, Colin Dixon, its founder and chief analyst of nScreenMedia, along with our esteemed group of panelists, Beth Anderson, SVP and GM of Fast Channels and VOD Sales at BBC, and Jason Peterson, CEO of GoDigital Media Group. Welcome, y'all.
Hello.
Hey, Eric. How you doing?
I'm doing well. There's Jason.
Glad to know I'm a pontificator.
Oh, come on. Just pontificate a little while for us anyway.
Those were some chill, relaxed tunes that we were listening to at the
I know,
I
pretty
could
chill,
listen
huh?
to that all day.
I feel like I need to have like some kind of a fancy cocktail to actually to kick it by the pool, as I am obviously doing.
Well,
All right,
great. Thanks for introducing us, Eric. And we're
y'all
going
have
to
fun.
chat. I'm going to chat with Jason and Beth about some of the hottest stories kicking around our industry at the moment. But why don't we, before we jump into that, I just want to ask each of you, Jason and Beth, just tell us what you do for a living. I know Jason gave us a thumbnail at the top, but to give us a thumbnail of what you do, Beth, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, happily. Hello, my name is Beth Anderson. I work at BBC Studios. Despite the accent, I do live in America. Very proudly British and sharing the best of British programming with America and with the world. I come from a solid background of business development, specifically working for BBC Studios pretty much throughout, although I did have a little spot with Sony on the operations side. The main bit that keeps me focused every day is finding the right paths to make sure that our content is available where audiences want to be. The big topic right now is Fast Channels. I am the SVP and General Manager of Fast Channels and VOD sales. So really looking at how we can make sure that we are servicing the best of British programming to all of the audiences that want to find it across 14 different fast channels in the US alone, on 12 different platforms, pretty exciting. And then providing lots of opportunity to watch on demand as well, both in ad-supported and behind the paywall.
Very good. Thank you, Beth. That was a great introduction. Jason.
All right. Jason Peterson, I'm the founder and chief executive at GoDigital. We are connecting content, community, and commerce at consumer passion points. So we're building an ecosystem, operating an ecosystem. We do that today in music. We do it in entertainment broadly. We do it in sports. We have 5 different business activities in 3 industries: music, video, which we call networks, and consumer products, which we call commerce. And I've been involved with Eric and the OTTX folks since it was the Entertainment Merchants Association, and before that, the Video Software Dealers Association. And by background, I'm a recovering attorney, and first career was producing movies and commercials and music videos.
So does that mean we better be careful what we say this morning?
I may or may not have a little history on Eric.
Just love the idea of a recovering attorney. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. Well, I want to get the ball rolling with some new data, some data I saw that came through on my feeds a couple of weeks ago. I think it was a week ago from eMarketer. And basically the data says that we have surpassed 111 million users, or we will surpass 111 million users of fasts this year. And I had a sort of split reaction to this. That's by the way, that's 33% of the US population they say are going to be using it. And they say 44% of the population are over-the-top video viewers. So I know my first reaction. I'm interested in y'all's first reaction. So Beth, how do you react to those numbers?
I love a stat. They're fantastic. And I think what's most interesting is how consistent this stat is. This is something that was projected over 2 years ago, and we're pretty much solidly following the path. I believe the original forecast was by 2025, the US fast streamers would hit 117 million. So it seems like we will amply get there by the measurements tracked. What I think is most interesting, and I don't know if we pay enough attention to it, is that we have moved in measurement from households to viewers, which I just think is profound. And I think sometimes when we see these stats, we tend to think either we're drawing attention away from another media model, or this is a discrete audience that isn't the same. That point that you were just saying there, Colin, about it being interesting that 40 or so percent of people are over the top viewers, and 33% of the country is watching fast. Super interesting. Doesn't necessarily mean all the people watching fast are over the top viewers. There's interesting developments for making fast available in lots and lots of different ways. Some of those are in those more traditional areas of cable and MVPD players. We see a number of those come on board. I think generally speaking, because I love the idea of seeing an audience member embrace content at different times of day when they're in different moods, we're not thinking that this is cannibalistic. We're not thinking that this is unique viewers. We're thinking that we're serving a time within a viewer's basis here. And what is the kind of most consistent part here is that this is a model in fast that is proving to be popular in an enduring fashion among a number of different viewers. Whether or not that has any relation to their consumption of SVOD is sort of still up for some measurement and analytics debate. But here we have something which is enduringly popular. And as I've been saying for a long time, linear is not dead. Linear is a really awesome way of surfacing content, and especially valuable for people who have tired brains like me at the end of the day.
It just won't go away, will it? You know, I remember very well, I remember Ted Sarandis proclaiming the death of linear TV. And I remember also writing a piece right afterwards and saying, nope, ain't gonna die. And it certainly hasn't. Your point about fasts in other areas is really interesting. I think it was Scripps who bought Newsy, retitled it Scripps News, and also distributes it on Diginet on over the air. And they claim they now have like 99% coverage of the US population. So it's a really good point. Maybe we'll explore that a little bit more. Jason, what do you think about those numbers? Do they sound low, high, or right about on the money?
Well, I love that everything that's old is new again, right? You know, I can't specifically opine on whether I think those numbers are accurate, although I do think that we should rename FAST and all these other acronyms we have something like streaming television. It would be easier to talk about for consumers.
Amen to that.
You know, and to your point about Ted Sarandos, so, you know, we were in the digital movie distribution business in 2008 when they launched streaming. And we forecasted similarly, I think, to you, what we were calling at the time the great unbundling, because the internet was neutral, right, and allowed anybody to deliver a competing video offer to the cable bundle or the triple play. But then we thought, you know what, this is going to lead to the great rebundling at some point. And I think that's sort of what we're seeing with FAST here and what we're seeing with the other sort of virtual MVPDs. And I think that the tech players are positioned to win as long as the internet continues to be a neutral environment. And that's why we're seeing so much growth here and 111 million. households and 35 million or 35% of Americans using these types of offers.
You know, my gut is that this number is actually low. And the reason I say that is because, first of all, penetration of just smart TVs, I think, is up at about 80 million homes now. Penetration of broadband is pretty much ubiquitous, not quite, but getting there. And also, I think number of people using at least one SVOD is pretty, I mean, it's up there. It's like 90%, I think, or maybe 88% was the last number I saw. And okay, so that's not fast, but when you think about the way we watch, when we're coming in through the portals, etc., it's kind of hard to avoid them these days. They're being heavily promoted by the platforms on which you're watching. And like if you're on Vizio, I bet almost 100% of Vizio users have used Watch Free Plus because they promote it. They're brilliant at promoting it. And same with Google TV. I see a lot of free content being promoted on Google TV on a daily basis as well. So I don't know, my gut is that people are watching it and are not aware. First of all, they have no idea it's fast. So your point about streaming TV is incredibly well made and taken. And it's actually something I've written about a lot. It drives me crazy that we use all these terms. And it came up on another panel a few weeks ago as well. So I don't think people really know that they're even watching it now. It's just TV, right?
Well, your point about
right.
Watch Free is super interesting. Sorry, Jason.
No, go ahead.
I don't think it's necessarily high for, say, people interacting with Watch Free or any of the other services. That same eMarketer data that's talking about that kind of 111 million right now is also claiming 180 million people are viewing on a regular basis in the US ad-supported video on demand. So if you think about a service that is carrying both of those, you'll find some services which lean more toward the video on demand portion and other ones that lean more toward the fast linear portion. But I think that 111 is specifically around linear, which I think is possibly more accurate. And I agree. I don't think the consumer necessarily knows the difference, nor should they have to, because it's really more about accessibility at a time when content saturation is at its absolute peak, trying to find different ways of engaging in programming. And I will also say, FAST to me is not an electronic programming guide. It's not an EPG. That is the most common way that you can find FAST today, but you do see a lot of variation. The Roku UI, for example, doesn't tend to gravitate toward a list of endless channels. It's more promotional spots. So you might not necessarily know that you're watching something that is a live feed, or might not necessarily clock it when you're on it, but you might associate it more with it's ad-supported content and it's on demand because I'm watching it. So there could be a little bit of confusion there too. Yeah, I think so. That's an interesting point about FAST being employed other places as well. I've noticed that BritBox has started. They've got a bunch of channels. You can just tune in now. There's a big ad as you come in at the bottom on the first screen that you encounter. And you can just click that and start watching stuff in progress. It's great. It's just, you don't have to, as you say, Beth, when you don't want to think, you don't have to think. Well, and more that you can put your trust in people who are massively passionate, as you will find on services that are really prescriptive about the type of programming that they're looking to serve, to give you content that you would want to see. And that, I think, is one of the biggest boons of knowledge that we've got from being in the FAST business. And we've been in it since the tippy top of it being a business of note. And I think what we learned is that absolutely it's a revenue generating business and it stands on its own right. It's also a top of funnel business, which is very accessible for audiences to come in. And it has demonstrated that linear plays a really important and valuable role in content discovery, which is why you are starting to see linear plays or linear barkers or linear feeds within the kind of SVOD behind the paywall model, both with and without ads. And that I'll say is separate than the learnings that we continue to make every day and very proudly through our BritBox Mysteries FAST channel, which is natively available on FAST platforms. So it's a two-way street, right? You can have a FAST experience that's kind of pushing out into where audiences are engaging in FAST, and then you have a linear experience which is drawing in when people are already subscribed. And both of them are really valuable, valid linear experiences and help to kind of demonstrate the power of putting a curator, a really passionate human curator, at the helm of content discovery.
Yeah, yes, indeed. So I wanted to, let's move on a little bit. There was a news item, you know, I could have picked any one of about a dozen. The one that I happened to see was that Samsung TV Plus had added 4 channels to their guide. Every single day when I look at the news, my news feeds, there's some service that's adding 1 to 4 to more channels to their guide. So I wanted to ask about that trend. Are we still expanding? Are services quietly dropping channels that we don't know about and they're staying the same? So let's talk about this, just the growth of the linear channels in these services. And Jason, why don't we kick it off with you? What's your perspective on this? You've got music channels, you've got sports channels. Is it getting difficult for your channels to be found?
You know, I think that we've, for a long time, been dealing with the problem of too much choice, right? And we are now in media broadly, competing for consumers' time, and it's been that way for many years. You know, when we all grew up, right, we didn't have mobile platforms, social media, all these different forms of massively multiplayer online games, all the things that compete for our time, right? And not everything ever made was available on demand. So my view, as part of what I'm calling the great rebundling here, is that there will be a continual pulling in the premium content space, if you will. And I consider even streaming television FAST to be premium relative to like UGC on YouTube or any of the meta platforms or TikTok or otherwise. And so, yeah, I think that there'll be a continual culling based essentially on who is finding success with audiences on the platform. You know, we work a lot in the multicultural space. We see advertisers asking for what they call, CTV or FAST. And I think that's a very good thing. I've heard that some folks in the industry have found programmatic advertising on their channels to be declining or just not growing in the way they thought. We haven't experienced that at all. It's over-indexing for us. So, I think in general, if you're a strong brand, right, brand signal quality of a certain type to a certain audience, and that's how you cut through the white noise of too much choice and compete for people's time. So if you're a strong brand, you're going to survive and you're going to thrive as this FAST or streaming television ecosystem evolves. If you've not built those strong direct-to-consumer relationships, it's going to be challenging.
Beth, you definitely have strong brands, but are you perturbed that all these channels are making it difficult for people to find your channels in the guide?
I think there's a couple of different ways that platforms will diverge on this moving forward. I think some might go more into a personalization, algorithm-driven approach where maybe you won't see all FAST channels, you'll see something that's like-minded and maybe there'll be more features. That model is very flexible to having technically thousands of channels. Other ones are going to be more finite and discrete. I don't know if it's actually secret or quietly happening. I feel like a lot of the services that we work with are quite loud and proud about the fact that they are continuing to iterate their service and they are cycling channels out based on performance. A number of them do and do so for really good reason. They need to make sure that the service is strong and that the channels that are on there are in good company and that their viewership is successful. The other part of this is that the big difference between traditional pay TV or cable channel and FAST is that it is much more iterative. It's fresher, it's more nimble. We can create different packages, different directions based on the popularity and direction of content that we're finding. We might, you know, for example, we have a one of its kind, I think maybe there's a couple more now, but it was certainly one of the first dual series channel with our two of our crime procedurals, Silent Witness and Utrix, that was born out of the success that we'd seen across the AVOD and linear landscape. That's something that we're responding to iteratively now. And as the audience continues to boon and grow, you're going to continue to find mass channel plays, and you're going to continue to find more specific audience plays that will be really useful for addressability in the ad space. Whether all services carry all of those channels, but they're not today, right? And we're completely agnostic to that because we want to go where our content makes the most sense. Do we think that we have a solid place on every platform outlet that we're working on? Yes, we do. We definitely have value there, but we recognize that the audience on each of these platforms is discrete and interesting and might be in a different mood to see different content. So I'm not too worried about discoverability and the mass of channels that are out there, because I do think that the way to approach this business is to recognize, A, it's not fully built, it's not baked, we're still working on it, and B, iteration and humility breeds better business. And I think that we deserve to have challenges on carriage. We shouldn't be, you know, leaning back and just accepting that we will have a guaranteed place in this market. We should fight for it. We should fight for relevancy. I think it keeps content owners much more honest and fiery in the gut. And I think it keeps advertisers engaged. And I think it keeps platforms really paying attention to make sure that what they're offering is on point for the audience that they're at play. So I may be a Pollyanna, but I'm pretty positive about the amount of iteration that exists and the channels that exist.
That Silent Witness and Nutrix pairing is an interesting one. You need a lift after watching a Silent Witness episode, and the Nutrix gives you that, right? A nice light touch.
Exactly. It's sort of playing inside the same realm, but fundamentally putting yourself as because I think that's something that, you know, we really hold dear, is that we are viewers of our own media type. We know what we want to watch ourselves, and so we'll moderate that. So sometimes, you know, that there's a huge amount of attention on single series channels as an idea, and a lot of people think that's it, that's what this is, it's just single series channels and everything else is sort of by the wayside. We have single series channels, we have our support of our owned and operated channels, and working with our SVOD friends, and we also have BBC branded genre channels, and all of them work really successfully to make sure that we are paying attention to what audiences are responding to, and introducing and finding new ways to introduce what is 100 years of previous catalogue and constantly new shows being made to audiences where they want to be and how they want to consume.
Yeah. I just want to remind the audience, if you want to ask a question, you can ask a question in the Q&A window. I have that open. I've even got the chat window open. So if you want to make a comment in the chat rather than ask a question, please do that too. So Jason, I wanted to ask you, one of the things that all of the announcements of the channels sort of twigged in me was something that I have been hearing from content providers, and that is that like Samsung TV Plus, it's built in. The channel plus thing is built into the device. That gives it an advantage, right? One of the things that I've heard some complaints about is that the built-ins are watching the data, and popular channels, they're going out and licensing content and creating channels to sort of substitute for, or, you know, to displace existing channels on their services. Is this something you've heard? Is this something that you're aware of? It probably isn't affecting you because it sounds like you have very distinctive brands, so it's very difficult to sort of duplicate that. But is this a problem? Is this an issue?
Well, I'm not going to speak to any particular cases, but I love the Charlie Munger quote: "Show me the incentive, and I'll show you the outcome." And so, you know, if you look at this across a litany of different industries, right? I mean, Amazon is widely known to have done this in consumer products, right? They look at the data, they look at what's working, they create a competing product.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So I think that we should simply look at the incentive, and that will largely inform the outcomes that we'll see.
I noticed, I was looking at some data from Ondia, I think it was Ondia, that basically tracked the top 10 or the top 5 fast linear channels over a period of several months. And interestingly, they were all Pluto TV channels.
Yep.
And actually, they were all Pluto TV channels that sat, if you go to Pluto TV, there's a bar of shortcuts. They're all Pluto TV channels that sit in those shortcuts.
They have a built-in advantage, right, within their own ecosystem.
Within their own ecosystem. It's a huge advantage.
And so the answer to that as a content provider is you need to have a brand, right? It needs to signal quality of a certain type to a certain audience strongly. And they need to, you know, so that they seek out your offer essentially.
So let me step away from this maybe slightly awkward conversation, because I know it was somewhat unfair of me to bring that up with both of you. But let's talk about promotion for a second. So it's a very crowded space. Give us a thought. How are you promoting your channels? How are you making sure that the people that you want to find them are finding them? Beth?
I was just looking up the stat Gavin Bridge just posted. It's 1,948 channels live right now. 1,948. So that's a lot, right? The interesting thing is that once you find an audience, well, certainly for us, our experience is that people come back. That once they know about us, we're not natively American content, so we have to fight a little harder to get that initial awareness going, and then people find us and love us. Having said that, you know, some of our natural, native, organic marketing comes from our really well-known brands, Doctor Who and Top Gear and Antiques Roadshow are kind of doing incredibly well off the back of existing awareness there. We have an incredibly successful BBC Earth channel. And I attribute some of that marketing success to the fact that those are tentpole brand names for us across our entire ecosystem. There are things that we have, you know, in local markets where we are around the world. We have a BBC Earth linear channel, for example. We have BBC Earth social media, and we're able to make sure that that is a household name as a result. So that's one of the key areas. The other key area is making sure that we find ways to be surfaced on the platforms themselves. And the way that we do that is by recognizing that each platform has a unique set of channels. Typically, I think everybody has a slightly different group of channels, and they have a unique audience, and they are programming across a swathe of content partners. So we are custom and specific with that. We might do a campaign, say a marathon or a sprint based on the popularity of a show based on a certain platform. One of the cooks that we work with on our BBC Food channel is a wonderful chef called Rick Stein. Does amazing cookbooks. He's not necessarily hugely known in the US, and not someone that you would see on a typical US TV network, but we saw that show was gaining some traction. It's very high appeal for travel and for food and for really good recipes. So creating stunts around that creates opportunities for a platform to get behind that as a marathon and then promote it. Now, anybody listening in who's ever worked in cable will say that's what we did there too, of course, because those marketing techniques are not unsuccessful. They were completely successful. And so leaning into marketing opportunities through really smart editorial curation and listening to what's popular is probably the number one area that we can do. And also, I think paying attention to what is popping, what is popular on that platform in question, and seeing what else they have. Some of these platforms are owned by content owners themselves, and you know when there are tentpole moments to gear around, and you know how to amplify that and halo that. And so really being, as I mentioned before, humble and listening and spending time with each of these platforms to find how we fit is the most impactful form of marketing that we have. Of course, inside the channels themselves, we have the opportunity to highlight when shows are coming up later on that channel, or highlight other channels that we have on that specific service. So lots and lots of different ways of exploring marketing opportunities.
Wow, I've never heard somebody say that you're being sensitive to the platform and what's going on with its native content, if you like, from the owners. That's really interesting thought.
It is quite interesting, right? Because I think we now live in a really sort of mixed age where content owners are also platforms, are also advertisers, and it's recognizing that there are beating hearts all over the place and not all of them are in the same rhythm, and we can run all of those rhythms, but we can do it discreetly.
Yeah,
not quietly, but separately.
So Jason, tell us how you're promoting your channels. Are you spending a lot of money with the platforms to advertise the channels natively inside the platform, or how are you doing that?
A couple of things to your point about promotion. And I think that the last point about audience members being in a lot of different places and needing to be sensitive to what the platforms are doing. We have a vision that these platforms are all becoming ecosystems. And we think of our networks as multi-platform networks. So they're not just fast or linear or any one format, right? They're multi-platform. And while we do spend a significant amount of money in paid media customer acquisition, and trying to understand the lifetime value of a customer is challenging. Honestly, it's one of our largest challenges. How do you know how much to spend to acquire a customer potentially if you don't necessarily have good life cycle data across all of these multi-platform places where they consume your content? So, we do spend a significant amount in paid media, but being a multi-platform network, what we've discovered works the best for us in our particular case, especially because we play in large and fast growing niche audiences and multicultural, is social, quite honestly. And we have a network that has the largest US based social following among US Hispanics under 35 and among any other sort of corporate or organizational entity. And that's been a real differentiator for us. And it's allowed us to mobilize significant amounts of people, activate significant amounts of people. And, and we really pay attention to that, what I like to call a long-term value-added bilateral relationship. Hopefully we're giving value to our audience over time. That's the long-term piece. And then reciprocally, they're returning value to us in the form of their time. And that translates into revenue for us over time. So we think of everything as customer lifetime value over long periods of time in a multi-platform world. And for us, social has been the primary driver of our.
Yeah. Yep. Let's turn our attention to sport. You're certainly involved in sport, Jason. It looks like your audio is reconnecting. I don't know what's going on there.
There we go. Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Hopefully you're back. I don't know what was going on there. One thing that came up in the news, well, of course, the migration of sports to streaming is fully underway now. We're seeing that we're seeing that all over the place. But what really caught my eye this last week was the announcement by Roku that they will be carrying MLB Sunday leadoff games on the Roku channel. So basically for free, distributed through their FAST service. And this struck me as something quite new. Of course, there have been announcements about NBA, G League games and WSL games being covered on FAST channels. But this is now a premium sport in the US that's released on FAST. A trend? Are we going to see more of this going forward, Jason? What do you think?
I think the short answer is yes. Traditionally, in my view, there's two ways to compete in the network space, either exclusivity of content or user experience. And for a long time, sports has been what's holding up the traditional cable and satellite ecosystem. And we've seen significant cracks, right? And there was an NFL game last year that was carried on, I think NBC bought it, right? And they used it to acquire subscribers to their multi-platform world, Peacock, and it was very successful. And I think, most people probably read about the new NBA contracts for media rights. I think 76 billion, if I recall correctly, over a period of time. And it's not just traditional television players, right? Amazon is one of the buyers, if I remember correctly.
That's correct.
And so I believe, generally speaking, that content has become a loss leader for the customer lifetime value in the conglomerated ecosystem. So if you're a company like Amazon, Samsung, Meta, Google, Apple, you have a tremendous customer lifetime value, and content is a very attractive way to acquire and retain those customers in your ecosystem. So sports rights value is going up. You know, when Todd Boehly bought the Dodgers with Magic Johnson in 2013 for $3.2 billion, people thought he was crazy. Right, but he turned around 3 weeks later and sold the media rights for 20 years for $8 billion. And that's only gone up. So, you know, should we have all have been lucky enough to have that foresight and buy sports franchises? But media rights are what's going to drive a substantial amount of audience and differentiation, because it's the only format that gets a lot of people together in real time, and advertisers want that.
Yeah. So, Beth, live events, live sports in fasts seems to be a thing, right? Will we all be watching the Super Bowl on a fast in 2030?
Well, I mean, all you need to do is look back at the last two Super Bowls. Last year, the most recent one, you saw Pluto ads for obviously Paramount's, you could watch it on Paramount Plus, and then you saw Pluto ads brilliantly executed in the middle of the Super Bowl. The year before, you had the infamous Tubi disruptor campaign that existed inside the Super Bowl. The idea of having these tentpole moments in sports bridge the gap of awareness for some of these services and where to watch is well underway. So it feels like sort of a hop, skip, and a jump to that world. I think what's kind of interesting is that ad-supported businesses in general, for the longest time, have been looked at as a sort of tertiary value, which is completely incorrect in my probably quite biased opinion. But if you think of value, like real value here, the most valuable thing you can have is someone's attention, is someone's time. And the best way to get someone's time is to put it in front of them without asking them to have 7 sign-up pages before they can watch a piece of content. It is the most immediate and most equitable form of media in a generation. And I think that is sort of seismic change in understanding what value can be done. Now, how you recognize that value going from a sort of carriage fee or upfront payment versus something that is earned by performance is something that takes a while to crack, right? But I think that, you know, when something is happening in the world and you want to watch it, you're going to go to a linear experience to watch that. And if you don't have access to cable, as multiple households in the US have not for a long time, not just because they're cord cutters, but because they're cord nevers, it's either choice preference or household income reality, then how many eyeballs are we losing on content? How much attention are we losing by limiting the access to the programming? I'm not saying it's going to be right for everything, but I do think it's part of a movement to make sure that there is more ready access to the people who want to watch it, and more opportunities for advertisers to find the holy grail of addressable audience, which, you know, when you're looking at a sport, there's quite clear indications of what type of programming advertising is going to be synergistic with a certain sporting event, just like there is for any sort of live event. It could be a musical performance as well, which is my passion privately. I absolutely love going to see gigs. That tells someone a lot about the type of adverts that would be relevant. So it is a seismic change. Nothing happens overnight, but also things are happening just in a very iterative fashion. You don't see change when it's happening. And I think the door is not at all closed to that being a reality.
Yeah. You know, you said something there that triggered a thought. One of the things that I do is I count how many people are still with traditional pay TV, how many are not. That decline in traditional pay TV is very definitely increasing. My calculations say 8 million people left traditional pay television in the US. in 2023, and only about 2 million of those picked up a virtual MVPD subscription to sort of semi-replace that experience and access to continue to provide access. And it occurred to me that this acceleration now could in fact be being caused by fasts, right? Because now there is a free, ready replacement for the linear experience with a lot of the brands that people know and trust. They're there. You know, you want news, you will find CBS, NBC, ABC, you'll find those brands there. You'll even find some of your local TV content there. You'll find your brands are there. So brands that people know are there. Is the fast ecosystem accelerating the decline in traditional pay TV?
Well, that's an interesting one because the programming is different. And I think there's always a temptation to have a sense of one new business emerging is cannibalistic on the other. But I just do think that the portrait of audience has grown. And I don't think it's necessarily discrete. I will also just say people still buy DVDs. But there are multiple types of media that work for multiple types of audience. Pay-per-view is still a thing. And in an extension of that, you know, there is a world in which pay TV is a premium at-home experience for premium content in its first window. We've had windows in our business for the last 20 plus years with SVOD partners as well. I think the other interesting piece is that we are seeing, to, you know, Jason's point about what's old is new again and bundling being the great rebundle happening. We're seeing bundles exist on subscriber services too. I mean, it's Disney, Hulu, and Max uniting to form a bundle there. Is that a cable experience? Is that essentially kind of replicating that? There was a really interesting article that Evan Shapiro shared a week or so ago saying, hang on a second, if we're going to bundle, why are we bundling to just TV in a world where people are also subscribing to music services?
Yep.
And other and websites, right? So is the bundle a multimedia bundle? Does that fit more in the world? And is that maybe one of the reasons why there is a continued decline on the traditional cable bundle, the traditional pay TV model, because there is more interest in having, for a household of individuals who are consuming media on a constant basis in greater numbers than ever before, a need to kind of broaden the scope of what's valuable if you're going to pay for a monthly bill.
Yeah. And that, of course, is what the wireless providers are doing, right? They're more creating the bundles that they're putting together to hold people on their wireless services are much more creative. They do include music services and video services. So that's a point well taken. I think that we need to be more creative. Jason, any thoughts?
I love what Beth said. I think that, again, content's becoming a loss leader for the customer lifetime value in the ecosystem. Your point about what cell phone companies are doing is salient to that. I think that the multimedia bundle is a great value proposition to consumers. I think it's a great customer acquisition and retention strategy for players that have an ecosystem. I'm sure many people who watch this watched the Lord of the Rings television series on Amazon, which was reported in trades to have cost $1 billion to make. There's no way they made $1 billion directly from that programming, right? Like, you know, and I validated this with some people, and so, you know, really it was all about attracting and retaining customers to the Prime ecosystem, because when they're a member of Prime and it's basically content plus free shipping, they're buying TVs, they're buying couches, they're buying groceries, they're spending a ton of money on all types of things. And that's really what drives enterprise value. And so, you know, for pure play content businesses, I think we need to be very cognizant of this, because this is the primary dynamic that I think is going to inform the landscape going forward. You know, cable television generally and traditionally was one of the greatest business models ever built. Consumers paid for all the content they do not watch. If you think about that, that's amazing, right?
I used to
And
call
this is
it content insurance.
that's right. That's right. And this is the ecosystem evolution of that, right? Where people are paying for not just the content they don't watch, but they're paying to be a part of an ecosystem. And there's value transfer that happens here
Yeah.
from the content owners to the platform or ecosystem owners. And I think that's a conversation that needs to be broadly had, because that's transformative to the industry and to where value is apportioned.
Yeah.
Taking a slight kind of tack on that from a slightly different perspective, I think that there's an honor in the pay TV and cable business that is we are reflecting in the FAST model today. There's a lot of the editorial standards that were held during the peak TV of cable that made for really engaging TV. Things that were designed to be played on a week over week basis to encourage retention across a long season or a short season. In the UK, series are very, very short, but there is still a need to engage people over a weekly cadence. You tell a story differently in that model. And it's not at all surprising to me that Suits was the #1 most viewed thing in America last year, because it was a show that was made for episodic play out to engage audiences over a long period of time. And as we think about having multimedia plays, and as we think about having the trust in an audience exist, that's why I really love the idea of this kind of absolutely free model of FAST, because it means that we have to make sure that the editorial standards of the content that we're programming is deserving of the footprint that we're giving it. And I think that there is a sort of lackadaisical nature in content creation when you already have someone in the bag. If you have a subscription, maybe you slightly take it for granted. I'm not saying this is true across the board, but there are definitely shows that I've watched personally that I haven't necessarily finished because it lost my attention. So having that in the editorial development of content moving forward and celebrating the shows that did have that embedded in their core, which is what we're seeing perform really strongly in the fast space today, is interesting and something that I think keeps us honest as program makers.
Yeah, yeah. And that Amazon series, Lord of the Rings series, was one of those series that quickly lost my interest, I can tell you. I want to talk about one more topic before we go, and that was this deal between Lionsgate and Nielsen. Lionsgate has asked Nielsen to measure the performance of its FAST channel movie spheres across all of the platforms that it's operating on. And thank you, Beth, by the way, for pointing this piece out, this article out. And as I read it, I'm going, what is going on here? Nielsen has no experience measuring the performance of FAST channels. Why does Lionsgate feel like they need Nielsen's help to figure out how movie sphere is going on when we're in a digital world? Don't we know? So what's going on? Beth, you pointed this one out. What are your thoughts?
I mean, look, I think it's so tempting to go into a traditional form of measurement because that's well-trodden ground, and it was the foundation of a very, very successful business. And so there's obviously merit in it. There was actually a post yesterday with Comscore, who was tracking among fast players specifically what the most popular service is. And it was between Roku and Pluto and Tubi, all wonderful, wonderful companies. I'm more interested in saying, do we have the measurement right? Is a view a view? Is that what we want? Is that what we're really keen on tracking? Because one thing that we, have as an overall business is an understanding that we're all united around the idea of serving an audience, whether you're a platform, whether you're an advertiser, or whether you're a content owner. And I think that in the world of internet-enabled streaming, we owe it to ourselves to explore slightly more deeply what a key performance indicator is. As we're looking at ranking, which I'm absolutely fine and down to do, can we look at a way to look at the overall picture rather than these slightly awkward offshoot conversations? And I don't know, can we be tracking when not everyone is tracked? Because it's not very easy today to do that. This is a forming, norming business that is figuring out itself, and like I said before, not fully baked yet. So what what is the thing that we care about? Is it hours? Is it engagement? Is it the type of viewer that's coming on board? Is it the time of day which is most popular? Is prime time still prime time? I think there are so many different ways that we can track that. I would say it's a bit of a shame if we stop at a Nielsen rating and then we're done.
Yeah. Jason?
I think that, first and foremost, advertisers, in my experience, they're looking for trust, right? They want third-party measurement. And so I think that's a part of this. Nielsen's also very well known for doing panels and behavioral analysis, and I think that could be very interesting. Beth, to your point about being in a digital world where theoretically there's a census of information available, I've had this thesis for a while now that the privacy laws that we've seen in the European Union and in the United States are in some ways actually a Trojan horse for the ecosystem or the platform providers, right? You have players that say, hey, we want you to regulate us. It's almost a form of regulatory capture, actually. We want you to regulate us, give us some rules to live by. But what happens is if you're the device or the platform provider, you have data on the users by way of essentially their opt-in through the end user license agreement. And you don't share that with your supplier ecosystem. You share the basics, right? But like, if you're any of the major tech conglomerates, you have a lot of data on your users that you are not sharing. And so I think to the point of the Lionsgate Nielsen relationship here, I think it kind of potentially serves both purposes, right? Creates trust for advertisers and provides them greater insight into who their audience is theoretically, because these platform ecosystems are not sharing all of the data that they have.
Yeah, I have a feeling that might be at core the real problem here. I asked each of you if you would come up with one story that resonated with you that we hadn't discussed yet. I left it really late. Do you want to tell us in 1 minute one story that you saw, Beth, that we think should be worth paying attention to? Are you all muted, Beth?
That's embarrassing. I just spotted this morning that Google TV has loaded in a new ad tech stack.
Oh yeah.
I think that's a super smart play.
Yeah.
As some of the services are in this space, in the fast space, are also ad experts and ad serving experts. We always benefit from increased functionality. So I think that's an interesting one to watch, and I'm super happy that people are looking at how we are serving the advertising business to make sure that it's a really clear path. When we have really, really strong viewership in this model, we want to make sure that the ad experience is as premium as the viewer.
Yeah, and that really plays into what Jason was saying about the tech players, right? Jason, was there any story that you saw that we haven't discussed this morning you thought we should pay attention to?
I alluded to it. The Wall Street Journal published a story about the NBA media rights deal. And there've been a number of stories like this recently. I think we're going to continue to see sports coming to these digital platforms.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to disrupt the traditional cable and MVPD ecosystem terribly. I believe sports is what's been holding that traditional cable and telco bundle together for the last 10 to 15 years. And the rate of change is going to accelerate as a result.
Yeah, amen to that. Well, Eric, we're up against the hour. We were joking before we got started that we were going to go for 3 hours this morning. I'm looking at the topics that I had left to discuss. We probably could have, but we are at the top of the hour, so I'm going to hand it back to you.
Yeah, unfortunately, we just didn't have anything to talk about, did we? And
Nothing.
Really knows what to say. Gosh, y'all are great. Really, really fantastic, and glad there was no one else here. Just the three of you, because it was a great deep dive into a number of things. By the way, Jason, Seattle, I live in Seattle. Seattle has a new sports franchise. Yeah, you may be interested in knowing about it. Being an investor yourself, we now have an ultimate frisbee professional team. So maybe that's going to go big.
There's got to be a channel. We got to have a channel.
I'm sure there will be. Yeah, you know,
I
sometimes
watched
you
that.
get in, it's probably ground floor or close to it. I love Ultimate Frisbee, though. It could catch on.
I want to know how many pickleball franchises are up there.
Oh my
I was
God.
just about to say pickleball. They took over a bunch of malls, didn't they? Abandoned malls, and they reconverted them into pickleball
Here in
courts.
New York, they're putting courts up in the streets.
Yeah.
That's wild.
If someone could eventually explain what the rules of pickleball are to my British sensibilities, that would be great. Because
All I know is when you serve it, it's got to bounce twice before you can really try and win.
I understand it
get
about
that?
as much as I understand hopscotch.
No
I
aces,
don't
no
know.
aces in pickleball.
Good to know.
Well,
Take us
again,
out.
see, we're finding so much more to talk about. Well, thanks so much. Colin, Beth, Jason, y'all are fantastic. Great discussion. It's going to be recorded. So actually, it is recorded. That's part of what we're doing here. We're making a podcast, a vidcast. So go check it out on Spotify. Tell your friends as well. There's a lot of value in this session and on all of our podcast sessions. So go check those out. We're going to be back again with our next edition of The Buzz on July 10th. So you can register to attend that and future episodes from our website out at ottx.org. You can find our podcast on Spotify. So I hope you'll join us and invite your friends as well. We are proud at OTTX to offer these sessions free to the OTT industry on behalf of our OTTX membership. If you're not yet a member, I want to invite you to head out to the site, ottx.org, and have a look into becoming one. We have membership tiers for a broad range of organizations and professionals. The link is going to be on the chat here, so you can jump out there and check things out with the OTTX sphere. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Colin, Jason, Beth, y'all are fantastic. Thanks, and have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.